So Elliot Powell is an assistant professor of American Studies at the University of Minnesota. His research and teaching sit at the intersections of race and sexuality in Black popular music. He is currently completing a manuscript entitled The Other Side of Things, Afro-South Asian Musical Intersections in Black Popular Music. He is also beginning a second book project entitled Prince, Porn, and Public Sex, which is inspired by the course he's been teaching at the University of Minnesota for the past 2.5 years that explores the politics of sex, sexuality, and music in Minneapolis during the 1980s. Next is L.H. Stallings. L.H. Stallings is professor of women's studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. She is the author of Mother is Half a Word, Intersections of Folklore, Vernacular, Myth, and Queerness in Black Female Culture, which was published in 2007. Her second book, Funk the Erotic, Trans-Aesthetics and Black Sexual Cultures, published in 2015, explores how Black sexual cultures produce radical ideologies about labor, community, art, and sexuality. And finally, Dr. Alicia Lola Jones is assistant professor of ethnomusicology in the Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology at Indiana University, Bloomington, where her research interests include musics of the African diaspora, gender studies, gastromusicology, and womanism. Her forthcoming book is entitled Flaming: The Peculiar Theopolitics of Fire and Desire in Black Gospel Performance, in which she follows the trope of the flamboyant choir director to understand the tensions surrounding men's performance of gender and sexuality in gospel music. Recently, the Shed NYC tapped Dr. Jones to be a consultant for a commissioned concert series in collaboration with director Steve McQueen and music icon Quincy Jones. Her writings appear in edited volumes in journals such as the Oxford Handbook on Voice Studies, Issues in African American Music, and Women in Music, among others. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
So I want to thank Terrion. I put down my water. I'm going to have a Marco Rubio situation, apparently, where I'm just going to be jugging water here. For really moderating the panel, I want to thank Terrion for moderating the panel. I'm the person who came up with the title, Come, and I'll talk a little bit in a second about why that is and what exactly I wanted to kind of achieve with this. I also, want to thank Emma and Sumanth and Zanzelli, basically sort of everyone who was on the kind of organizing committee of the Prince Symposium with me. Again, Emma, Sumanth, and Zanzelli, Megan, Brian, Tom, Susan, of course, Arun, for all of your work with really putting this together. It's been a really sort of fantastic, really 3 days. And I also want to thank you all for coming here, for sharing all of your stories, for loving Prince really unapologetically. And I want to also, of course, thank Prince for really bringing us here and bringing us, again, really sort of, and to really bringing us together. I want to first sort of start by saying when I was actually getting my water downstairs, there were two people who weren't a part of the symposium who were sort of noticing that everyone was here for Prince. And one guy said to sort of another guy saying, Prince really put Minneapolis on the map. And the other guy said, but what about Bob Dylan? And he responded by saying, I don't think many people know that Bob Dylan's from Minneapolis, but Prince made it known that he's from Minneapolis. And this is, true, right? And so again, this conference about this symposium about being Prince from Minneapolis, right? We're not only kind of celebrating the fact that Prince is from Minneapolis, but for me, part of what the title of the symposium is also really trying to address and speaking to is almost a kind of love letter to Prince, right? It's to Prince from Minneapolis, right? So he gave the city so much, and this symposium is really a gift to him. And so I want to start by actually reading a selection from a letter that Professor Jigna Desai and I actually co-authored in support of Prince's honorary doctorate, which had been in the works prior to actually Prince passing. And so when the School of Music was actually doing the kind of work, they reached out to really sort of Jigna Desai who at the time was the chair of the Department of Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies here. And then she reached out to me to help her actually write this. And so I want to kind of share a kind of brief sort of selection from that letter of support. So we start by saying it would be difficult to overstate the importance of Prince's contributions to the study of gender and sexuality and race. And so while Prince has long been admired for his contributions to music, here we are very much interested in writing today in support of this nomination to articulate the impact of his work on the domains that sit outside of music, and especially those of race, gender, sexuality, and socioeconomic kinds of disparities. On stage, in music videos, and on recording, Prince often challenged norms of gender and sexuality. Indeed, at the height of his career, really during the 1980s, Prince vacillated between falsetto and a lower register. He also developed a sex-positive female alter ego named Camille, and he often donned high heels, eyeliner, and really bikini bottoms, as we're all really familiar. And we continue to say that these were uncompromising and very much unapologetic, really performative gestures of androgyny and queerness that not only continue really the legacies of Black artists like Little Richard and Sylvester, as well as LaBelle and Betty Davis, but also challenged the 1980s really sort of US political culture that sought a return to and a shoring up of post-war norms of masculinity and femininity, as well as heterosexuality. And then we continue to say that in a world that demanded and still demands a fitting in, Prince stood and still stands out. And then we continue to say that Prince wrote songs for and about women that centered on their own sexual agency and pleasures. And these were songs that made men really sort of peripheral to women's own kind of embodied kind of erotic expressions and visuality and practices of joy and freedom. We hear them on songs like Head, and we hear them on songs like Darling Nikki, as well as countless others, right? Well as Come, right? It would be sort of an exaggeration to say that Prince's cultural contributions have not only challenged really dominant paradigms of racialized gender and sexuality, but they have actively imagined and offer new kinds of gender formations and sexual possibilities and racial uprisings. So Prince unabashedly advocated for gender really nonconformity and racialized sex positivity and female sexual expression and agency in his music and performance and life. In short, he was a public intellectual through his music as well as his activism, and his contributions opened new pathways for a wide range of audiences over numerous decades. And so this symposium here has shown really throughout these past 2 days, and you all are very much the audience for whom Prince obviously opened these new pathways for. And so when we were, as an organized committee, thinking about the different kinds of plenaries that we wanted to put together for the symposium, we knew that we wanted to do something on gender and sexuality and Prince. And when I was asked to come up with the title for it, I suggested, and really suggested is putting it loosely, I very much demanded, that we call it Come. I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about why I like Come, because, because I know that we're going to talk about the album in sort of the plenary, but Come, in terms of the album, is my top 10 favorite Prince album, perhaps even top 5. It goes in between, and very much I like Come because every song is a sonic look. So we all know that Prince didn't just give us outfits, right? He gave us looks. He gave us statements. And I think each song on Come really musically is a look. It's actually a statement here. It's a statement that, taken together with really the rest of the album, really the songs really develop a kind of ensemble, a kind of collection, a kind of collective. And I like Come because it's pornographic as well as poetic. It's sexual, sensual, as well as spiritual. And we hear this in the gestures toward really the Song of Solomon, as well as the words by Henry David Wong on Solo. And so I like Come because, if you can't already tell by the number of times I start the sentence off with I like Come, I like it because of its double entendres. Of course, Prince is known for his own kind of double entendres, as was mentioned earlier with the song, with really sort of Let's Work and many others. I love these double entendres. I love the Come album because of how it can signal sex and this is important, and, it's not an or, but an and, something else. It signals sex and something else. And so when really Zinzelli, Soke, and I were thinking about the people who we wanted to invite to be a part of this plenary, we wanted to get folks who could address Prince, sex, and that something else. And this is where really Alicia and really Lola would be perfect for this. Now, I'm not going to take up too much time because I really want most of this time spent really listening to and learning from to actually sort of learning from everyone else on this plenary about learning from really Alicia as well as Lola. But I want to kind of briefly think through what the sexual and something else means for me. And instead of actually talking about Come, which I said is in my top 10 of favorite Prince albums, I want to do so through my #1 favorite Prince album entitled Dirty Mind. Give a shout out to Dirty Mind. So while explicitly erotic expressions were very much sort of features in his previous work and would continue to be really throughout his career, for me, Dirty Mind was different for his sustained and arrayed engagements with and varied kinds of representations of really dissident sexualities. So the opening track, the really sort of opening titular track deals with sex work, right? Sort of, as Prince says, sort of, if you got the time, I'll give you some money to buy a dirty mind. Head, of course, recounts a woman's abandonment of marriage and monogamy as well as virginity in order to pursue the kind of mutual pleasures of casual oral sex. And of course, When You Were Mine finds Prince singing about group sex with multiple genders, again, sort of when he was there sleeping in between the two of us. Sister also sort of details the kind of consensual kind of incest and cross-generational sex. So Dirty Mind for me then highlights and makes cultural space for really myriad kinds of erotics that are excluded from and subvert norms governing proper sex and sexuality. It explores the queer politics and pleasures of sexualities deemed and policed as very much immoral, bad, and well, dirty. And so very much as the lyrics of Dirty Mind make use of the term dirty to articulate non-normative erotics, the album sound provides another meaning of the same word. Again, a kind of double entendre working within this album. Prince's voice and other instrumentation on the album aren't as crisp or clear, as clean as they are on previous and subsequent albums. Very much the music on Dirty Mind instead sounds rougher, more sort of muted, and very much in a word, really dirtier. This dirty sound gives the album a demo-like feel, if not actually being a demo itself, and very much leaving it to lack the kind of clarity and richness and finish that typically comes with standard and properly mixed and mastered kinds of recordings in studio albums. For example, his background vocals often sound muffled. Very much EQ levels really shift within a song like Head. And tracks like Sister are only 90 seconds and very much end very sort of quickly and very much abruptly. And Dirty Mind is Prince's shortest album, right? It's under 30 minutes, all giving Dirty Mind an incomplete and unpolished, a raw, a dirty quality. But rather than detract from the album's sexually explicit lyrical content, for me, Dirty Mind's raw demo feel works in tandem with it. On Sister, for instance, really the low audio fidelity makes it hard for listeners to really decipher if one of the lines in the song's second verse reads, "She's the reason for my sexuality," or "She's the reason for my bisexuality." And I've read and seen sort of, again, sort of multiple interpretations of which one is correct. But for me, the whole issue is not actually deciding which version, which reading is actually correct in terms of that particular line, but rather its kind of diminished sound actually facilitates a slippage that marks and enacts a non-normative kind of sexuality, the loss of one's virginity in the former, and the awakening of new sexual desires in the latter. In other words, it's the song kind of deviation from a standard studio sound quality that both frames and organizes and produces really Prince's own kind of deviant and queer sexualities. It is what creates Prince's development of a soundtrack of and for a dirty mind. Here I think that Prince was onto something here with really the lyrical and sonic content on Dirty Mind. If you haven't been paying attention to really the news lately, really some communities of color, and especially sort of black communities, are under increased really surveillance and visibility. Very much a surveillance that is only exacerbated for LGBT black people. And a surveillance that often goes hand in hand with the policing of and violence on those kind of surveilled populations, as evidenced by really the rising incarceration numbers and murders of black LGBT people. So thus, for me, what makes Dirty Mind so amazing is how it seems as if Prince recognizes such trappings of the entanglements between visibility and recognition and violence. And so the sparse, demo-like feel of Dirty Mind becomes almost a blueprint or a survival strategy for escaping such oppressive systems of surveillance. Its sonic feeling of being unmastered actually sort of escapes and refuses to conform to the standards governing really typical kinds of commercial releases. As such, improper sound shape and are shaped by its improper lyricism. It's this kind of pursuit of impropriety that assists in a kind of imagining of a queer elsewhere, kind of utopic elsewhere that Prince defines and imagines as uptown on Dirty Mind, and a sexual and spiritual and sonic elsewhere that Rosa Lamonda and Alicia will powerfully articulate today. So with that, I will leave you to them to talk. Thank you.